can start now. I have to. I call to order the informal meeting of the plenary to brief members on my priorities for the rest of the presidency. Before we proceed with the briefing, we started the new year on a sad note. First, it is my sad duty to pay tribute to the memory of His Majesty Sultan Qaboos bin Said of the Sultanate of Oman, who passed away on Friday, 10 January 2020. On behalf of the General Assembly, I request the representative of Oman to convey our condolences to the royal family, the government, and people of Oman. Furthermore, I would like to express our sincere condolences to and solidarity with the governments and people affected by the tragic loss of life and damage in the airplane crash in the Islamic Republic of Iran. In addition, I would like to express our heartfelt condolences to and solidarity with the government and people of Australia for the loss of life and damage caused by the bushfire. Lastly, I would like to also express our sincere condolences to and solidarity with the government and people of Niger for the loss of life and damage caused by attack against not only the army base, but the loss of lives generally. May I now invite representatives to stand and observe a minute of silence in tribute to the memory of His Majesty Sultan Qaboos bin Said, as well as in honor of the memory of those who lost their lives. A minute of silence. A formal plenary meeting to pay tribute to the memory of His Majesty will be held at a later date to be announced. We shall now proceed with the briefing. I would like to welcome warmly the DSG, as well as to welcome to the podium Chef de Cabinet and Deputy Chef de Cabinet of the Office of the President of the General Assembly. A document containing a list of key events and meetings of the General Assembly has been prepared by my office and made available in the room. I'm happy to see you all after a well-deserved holiday season. I trust you all had a great time with your families and ready for the resumed session. I wish you all a happy and fulfilled 2020. It's my pleasure to brief you today on the priorities for the remaining part of the 74th session. First, I'm grateful for the cooperation I've enjoyed since my assumption of the presidency. I appreciate the human and financial resources as well as moral support that member states have given to the office of the President of the General Assembly. As of today, 13 member states have contributed to this, have contributed the sum of $4,432,152 to the OPGA Trust Fund. There are also 29 advisors seconded to the office. I am pleased that there are still commitments from member states to do even more. In addition, I've enjoyed a special relationship with the monthly president of the Security Council, president of the Economic and Social Council, as well as the Secretary General, and I'm grateful for their warm partnership and support. The aforementioned, coupled with the coordination with and support from the Department of General Assembly and Conference Management, DGACM, Department of Global Communications, DGC, protocol, as well as other United Nations offices and agencies, has ensured that the OPGA was able to discharge its duties satisfactorily this far. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, during the main session of the 74th session, we held a high-level week graced by our leaders who, apart from taking part in the general debate, participated in the Climate Action Summit, the high-level meeting on universal health coverage, and the Sustainable Development Goals Summit. They also attended the commemoration of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the high-level dialogue on financing for development, the International Day of the Elimination of Nuclear Weapons, and the third and the midterm review of the Samoa Pathway. In addition, their active engagement at the 2019 High-Level Week has further reinforced the fact that they attach much importance to multilateral cooperation, despite the fears of some regarding its deterioration. Excellencies, the 6 committees of the General Assembly were also able to conclude their work, even with some difficulties in some cases. I will not rehash details of that work, as you must have read those reports, even if you hadn't attended all the sessions. However, it may be useful to note that the first committee adopted 64% of its resolutions by recorded votes. The second committee was united on the 2030 agenda and the need to accelerate its implementation. The third committee recommitted to equality and human rights. The first committee worked to ensure a landmark guideline on the long-term sustainability of outer space activities. The fifth committee approved the sum of $3.07 billion for the year 2020 in its first annual budget since 1973. And the sixth committee, in line with its tradition, was able to conclude its work by consensus. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I have flagged these examples to make the point that though the processes were difficult, we did not fail. Indeed, we succeeded. Nonetheless, particularly in the first committee, we would have been more comfortable with making such decisions via consensus. Excellencies, I am not under any illusion that all that was decided is resolved, or that we will not have differences in the remaining part of the session. I note the reservations by some delegations on specific issues, and it is my hope that we can resolve them amicably. I urge us all that when our positions differ on issues, we should engage even more in dialogue, as this is the very essence of our organization. Also, we should always work and bear in mind that as member states, large or small, prosperous or not, peaceful or seeking peace, our destinies are intertwined. None of us is successful until all of us are. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, as I've often reiterated, our priority for the 74th session is the implementation of existing mandates, peace and security, poverty eradication and zero hunger, quality education, climate action, and inclusion. All these are anchored on the already agreed SDGs. We are determined to galvanize partnerships in implementing the roadmap which we have shared with you. Accordingly, we'll focus on the following issues in the coming weeks. 1, peace and security. International peace and security is the key to achieving the SDGs, as no development can happen in the absence of peace. We need to work harder on achieving peace and security is evident in the current tragedy, which has led to the loss of 176 lives. If ever diplomacy should achieve its purpose, this is one urgent area it must show its face. The Security Council, as well as other relevant actors, ought to prioritize getting a lasting solution to this. This crisis can also not be dissociated from the larger situation in the Middle East. It is thus critical that we find solutions to Israel, the lingering Israel-Palestinian conflict or question, as with those in Syria, Yemen, Libya, and others. I'll continue to flag this issue with the Presidents of the Security Council and the Secretary General, as well as with all those who are able to assist in this regard. Second is International Day of Education. I'll convene an event to celebrate the second International Day of Education on 24th January 2020. It will have in attendance various stakeholders in the education system, including governments, the private sector, students, and civil society organizations. It will thus focus on transforming the educational system through partnerships and provide an avenue for stakeholders to network and share best practices. Ensuring access to free and quality primary and secondary education, as well as affordable and inclusive vocational and technical education, is important, and I will continue to reach out to you beyond the International Day of Education on how best we can continue to collaborate in achieving this. Already, the morning dialogue which we had in relation to education has provided us useful ideas, encouraging us to go further. Zero hunger. I'll host an event in February to discuss the topic, targeting hunger, South-South and triangular cooperation for transforming agriculture. It's my hope that member states will use this opportunity to deepen discussion on how to strengthen cooperation to achieve zero hunger, particularly through partnership in the agricultural sector. We can end hunger and help eradicate poverty if we deepened cooperation in modernizing the agricultural sector, particularly as it concerns availability and affordability of industrial machineries, irrigation systems, high-yield seedlings, and access to finance. Throughout the session, I will also be following up on the conclusions we reach during that event. There will be an ocean conference from 2nd to 6th June in Lisbon, Portugal. A preparatory meeting to determine the themes of the 7 interactive dialogues will be held from 3rd to 4th February. The preparatory meeting will also provide initial inputs for the declaration to be adopted at the end of the conference. As I have communicated to you all earlier, the permanent representatives of Denmark and Palau have been appointed to co-facilitate this process. As always, I count on your engagement with them to assure success, which is for all of us. Biodiversity Summit. The Biodiversity Summit is a mandated event that the permanent representatives of Costa Rica and Italy will facilitate its preparatory process. They will convene their first meeting on Thursday, 16 January. And I urge you to render all necessary support to them, as we must do our best to tackle the environmental emergencies that we currently face. Accordingly, we must build on the political momentum generated by the Paris Agreement in 2015 and the Climate Summit last September to accelerate action to save the planet from the peril that inaction can unleash. This is particularly so in light of our disappointment that we could not reach consensus on important issues during COP25 in Madrid. High-level dialogue on desertification. I'll convene a high-level dialogue in collaboration with the Secretariat of the United Nations Convention on Combating Desertification on June 9. The dialogue will aim to review progress made in the fight against desertification, land degradation, and drought. Initiative on international financial accountability, transparency, and integrity. Together with the President of ECOSOC, I'm currently working on an initiative on financial integrity. This is in line with General Assembly resolution, which mandated the President of the General Assembly and the President of ECOSOC to give due consideration to the need to promote international cooperation to combat illicit financial flows with a view to foster sustainable development. More information will follow. It is my hope that an outcome of this initiative, in conclusion, inclusion is key to our world. Exclusion has been a major source of instability in all societies. There is absolutely no reason to exclude anyone, whether they are man or woman, youth or old, disabled or able, or because of their faith, color, or where they are from. Accordingly, I urge all delegations to be involved actively in the celebration of the 25th anniversary of the Fourth World Conference on Women, 20th anniversary of Resolution 1325 on Women, Peace and Security, as well as the 10th anniversary of UN Women, among others. Also, on conclusion, I will organize a high-level youth plenary on 31 March 2020 in conjunction with the President of ECOSOC. This will give youth an opportunity to interact among themselves as well as with other stakeholders, including member states and the United Nations officials. There is no doubt that we have to devise a strategy to tackle the immediate problem that our youth face, such as lack of quality education, unemployment, and underemployment, among others. United Nations at 75. The planning to commemorate the United Nations at 75 is an important one, and it has since begun. The anniversary gives us the opportunity to evaluate the past 74 years of the United Nations existence, and decide the direction we want to go in the next years. While the United Nations has sadly failed in some instances, and we know these instances very well, there is no doubt that overall it has been a force for good all these years. Among other things, it has successfully ensured that a war near the scale of the one that led to its creation has not occurred. It gave needed impetus to decolonization. It supported the struggle to end apartheid. It gave strong leadership for all conventions in support of human rights. It has been the main platform for partnership for development and the resolution of disputes. I have appointed the permanent representative of Qatar and Sweden to co-facilitate this important process for the preparations for the commemoration. I'm certain they will consult with member states in the discharge of this important duty. It's also important to mention that the review of the high-level political forum on sustainable development, alignment, and reform of the organization, including the Security Council, will continue to be of utmost importance. I've appointed co-facilitators for each of these processes, and I am convinced they will lead us with skill and wisdom. Excellencies, in conclusion, I will continue to support, to count on all delegations, United Nations organizations, as well as civil society organizations to advance the implementation of the priorities mentioned above. On the part of the office of the President of the General Assembly, be most assured always on our firm commitment to work with all in line with both the charter of our organization and in view of the urgency of the issues before us. I thank you. My attention has been drawn to the fact that the preparatory meeting for the Ocean Conference is 4th to 5th, not 3rd to 5th, please. It's just 2 days. Yeah. I now open the floor for comments or questions. In order to hear as many speakers as possible within the limited time, may I request the delegation to make their interventions concise and not longer than 3 minutes. I thank you for your cooperation. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Togo, speaking on behalf of the African Group. Togo, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le
Thank you, President. It is my honor to take the floor on behalf of the African Group. First of all, we would like to thank you for convening this informal plenary meeting and for the presentation that you have just made about the priorities for your presidency during 2020. The African Group would also like to commend the smooth running of the first section of this 74th session under your leadership, be it in the context of the general debate, the high-level meetings on relevant issues, or the work of the 6 major committees of the General Assembly. The group notes the very encouraging results obtained last year during the first part of our session under your wise stewardship. In spite of the many global challenges that we are all facing, you were able to facilitate our deliberations within the most representative body of this organization. The African Group takes note of the main priorities that you've just outlined for this new year, 2020, in which our common organization will celebrate its 75th anniversary. As has been the case during the first part of your mandate, the group would like to endorse your priorities for this second phase and will be committed alongside you in the context of the forthcoming important deadlines, such as the marking of the international days relating notably to education, the elimination of racial discrimination, the issue of remembering victims of slavery and transatlantic trafficking of slaves, as well as the International Nelson Mandela Day. The group also notes the high-level debates and interactive dialogues that you intend to organize on important issues such as desertification, harmony with nature, safety, security, and good urban governance. In the same vein, the group will strive to work with your office on financing and assistance provided to member states facing natural disasters and other major emergencies. Humanitarian intervention and the need to adequately fund such activities are issues that the African Group intends to tackle in the most effective way possible. Africa is, of course, concerned deeply by all of these issues and challenges that the international community more broadly is facing, whether we're talking about climate change, humanitarian challenges, migration, development issues for LDCs, but also middle-income countries, without, of course, forgetting the more specific challenges that affect small island states, landlocked states, and indeed states with a coastline. President, in May this year, we will undertake the review of the peacekeeping operations budget, in which, as usual, the African Group will discharge its role, taking due account of the difficulties that Africa is facing in the domain of peace and security. The appropriate level of financing for peacekeeping missions is more critical than ever, given the progressive role that these missions are playing in aspects pertaining to confidence building, capacity building, electoral assistance, intercommunity liaison work, programmatic activities, and so on and so forth. In this regard, the group also wishes to underline the crucial importance of cooperation between the United Nations and the African Union. To conclude, President, the African Group would like to reiterate its commitment to work with your good offices to resolve long-standing issues, such as, for instance, the reform of the Security Council and the revitalization of the work of the General Assembly. Finally, President, I would like to assure you that we fully support you and your office. This support is unconditional. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Togo speaking on behalf of the African Group. It's my honor to now invite Kazakhstan to speak on behalf of landlocked developing countries. Kazakhstan, you have the floor.
Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, Happy New Year to all and best wishes for this UN Jubilee year. Mr. President, thank you for convening this informal briefing on your priorities for the resumed part of the 74th session of the General Assembly. I have the honor to deliver the statement on behalf of the group of landlocked developing countries and in my capacity as the new chair for the term 2020-2021. From the outset, our group of countries would like to express its profound gratitude for the role the President of General Assembly has played, leading to successful midterm review of the Vienna Programme of Action for LLDCs for 2014-2024, which was convened on 5th and 6th December last year. Let me assure you of the continued support of the group. Our 32 countries look forward to the implementation of your roadmap's priorities. In particular, we would like to underscore the importance of some of the President's activities to the landlocked developing countries, in particular, high-level thematic debate on the impact of rapid technological change on the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and targets, informal interactive dialogue on commodity markets, inclusion, gender equality, and women empowerment, 2020 UN Conference to support the implementation of Sustainable Development Goal 14, conserve and sustainable use of the ocean, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development, SDG 4 on education, high-level dialogue on desertification, and financing for development and partnerships. Mr. President, these priorities will help in addressing some of the key areas of importance to the LLDCs highlighted in the political declaration of the midterm review and the Vienna Programme of Action. Therefore, we call on you and your office to ensure that the special needs of the landlocked developing countries are equally addressed in these activities. In addition, our group of vulnerable countries envisages that these activities will result in stronger partnerships for the LLDCs to implement the SDGs in due time, leaving no one behind. To conclude, Mr. President, the group of landlocked developing countries stands ready to contribute to the preparatory process of the 75th anniversary of our big international family, which we celebrate this year. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Kazakhstan speaking on behalf of the landlocked developing countries. I now call on the European Union, representative of the European Union, to deliver a statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and Happy New Year and best wishes to all colleagues. And I want to echo your condolences to our colleagues from Oman, Niger, and Australia. Mr. President, the European Union welcomes this opportunity to hear about your priorities for the 74th session. and to exchange views on how to best address them collectively. You can count on the full support of the EU and its member states in turning your priorities, which are very much shared priorities, into concrete action and results. Mr. President, the Republic of North Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, Albania, Bosnia-Herzegovina, as well as Ukraine, the Republic of Moldova and Georgia aligned themselves with the statement relating to the priorities of this session that I'm now making. First of all, let's be clear, 2020 is a pivotal year, not only for the UN and its 75th anniversary. For 3/4 of a century, the UN has served us all very, very well indeed, not only as an enduring symbol of multilateral cooperation and the rules-based international order, but also more concretely in making our world a much safer and better place. The EU, as one of the staunchest supporters of the United Nations and the multilateral system, is convinced that the increasingly complex challenges we face today require even greater international cooperation and international solutions. The UN anniversary must therefore be used not only to showcase the organization's achievements, but also to very concretely reflect on how to further reinvigorate the UN that delivers for all. It is our common responsibility to demonstrate the added value and relevance of this organization and the global rules-based order it represents. The upcoming negotiations on the declaration to be adopted during the high-level event on 21st September will be an excellent opportunity to demonstrate our strong commitment and ambition. We are looking forward to working constructively with the newly appointed co-facilitators of Qatar and Sweden, as well as with the whole UN membership. The active involvement of civil society and youth, as you said, Mr. President, will be key to ensuring that we are not only talking amongst ourselves, but also listening to our citizens, to the peoples of the UN. Mr. President, we will need a very strong, agile and effective UN to address the ever-complex challenges we face. 2020 should be a year of delivery on key policy priorities, many of which you just touched upon. Starting with strengthening global action to tackle climate change, a major priority by itself, but also, as you rightly said, integral to the effective implementation of the SDGs. Climate change is the defining issue of our times. I think Secretary General Guterres was very clear in saying that current efforts are insufficient to achieve the global ambition. It is 5 minutes to midnight in the global climate emergency. Last September's Climate Action Summit highlighted how climate action can have meaningful impacts on people's lives, including on their jobs and health, underlining the need to align policies and systems to speed up the implementation of both the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals, leaving no one behind. What was positive and something to build upon is that many of the strongest outcomes of that Climate Action Summit relates to partnerships together with the private sector. The summit also delivered important new actions, a surge in climate momentum and a clear objective limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees and achieving a carbon-neutral world by 2050. The new European Commission President, Madame von der Leyen, presented Europe's response, aligning with this goal in the form of a Green Deal just 10 days after she took office, a goal that will be enshrined in a climate law to be presented this spring. The message was clear: Europe will stay on the forefront in the fight against climate change. Unfortunately, the COP25 summit in December did not deliver the outcome the EU had hoped and worked for. We all need to step up collectively to ensure that COP26 in November will be a success, and we are ready to play our part, Mr. President. Along with climate change, the global decline in biodiversity is another major threat to humanity. This year should see successful delivery on the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, including work building up to the Leaders' Summit on Biodiversity during High-Level Week. We and our member states will also continue to engage with partners in preparing the 2020 UN Ocean Conference, as you mentioned, aimed at strengthening international ocean governance. This year also marks the beginning of the last decade of the implementation of the SDGs. We have all committed, as the Secretary General has called for, to make sure that we launch an ambitious decade of action. We are fully behind this ambition. The Sdg Summit last summer was a timely opportunity to reinvigorate political momentum for achieving the 2030 Agenda with its SDGs and the Addis Ababa Action Agenda of Financing for Development, as well as to ensure synergies with the Paris Climate Agreement. Your proposal, Mr. President, to promote partnerships for advancing the achievement of the SDGs in particular goals 1, 2, and 4 on poverty eradication, zero hunger, and quality education, and your call for urgent concerted action have our full support. The EU also fully supports the Leave No One Behind approach, ensuring that the most vulnerable do not starve and, as you said, have a fair chance to live meaningful, well-informed and dignified lives. The third major priority relates to human rights. We commend the emphasis you have placed on promoting inclusion and empowerment of youth and women. 2020 is an important year for the rights of women and girls, as it marks the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, as well as the 20th anniversary of Security Council Resolution 1325. These anniversaries are an opportunity for all of us to come together, celebrate the progress achieved, and reflect on and also step up to the remaining challenges. The EU will work with all partners to ensure that these anniversaries are not only successful events, but also pave the way for more ambitious reforms and changes in the years to come. We also fully support your emphasis on promoting inclusion. The EU is signatory party to the Convention on the Rights of Peoples with Disabilities and very committed to making the UN inclusive and accessible to all. So we fully support this work, as well as the UN Disability Inclusion Strategy. The EU also strongly believes that the UN should be open to all. For our decisions to be effective, they need to reflect the positions and visions of all concerned actors. In this respect, it's essential to ensure the full and meaningful participation of civil society, NGOs and indigenous peoples in the work of the General Assembly. Human rights defenders have a crucial role to play too. They must be heard and they must be protected. We pledge to make 2020 the year of civil society at the UN, and we will ensure that they are fully included in the celebration of all our anniversaries. Lastly, Mr. President, we would like to see 2020 also a year in which we further improve the work of the General Assembly and its committees. As in the past, we look forward to constructively engaging towards the revitalization of the GA based on gradual progress made in recent years. But more needs to be done to further streamline the agendas and working methods of this body and aligning its committees, in particular the second committee, with the 2030 agenda. To conclude, Mr. President, rest assured that you will find in the EU and its member states a very steadfast supporter on your side in this challenging year, for which I wish you all a very successful deliberation. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
I thank the distinguished representative of the EU for his statement, and I'll give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Kingdom of Morocco for his statement. Morocco, you have the floor.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, President. Thank you for calling this meeting. I'd like to begin by saying that your priorities are also ours, and you have our commitment in contributing to their implementation and success. We don't have much time, so I just have 4 observations, President. The first is on the celebration of the 75th anniversary of the creation of the United Nations. We are pleased that our colleagues, the ambassadors of Sweden and Qatar, will be facilitating the political declaration to be heard on the 21st of September. I also now have an observation. We'd like this declaration to focus on the future and not looking at the past. We hope that this will be a declaration that will also be based on what brings us together within this House and not what divides us. We need to send a strong, positive and committed message for the future. And I echo those who preceded me in saying that we should think about young people, women, children, and think about the future and how we can help them. Secondly, Chairman, on the thematic issues, the summit of last September, and we said this before it was held and before its success, should not be an end in itself, nor a conference without any follow-up. We need to follow up the results of these summits. The climate problem is not just a slogan. The climate problem is a danger. It's an obligation and an imperative that should bring us together to provide a response to these emergencies that await us. My third observation, President, is on the SDGs. We've just launched the Decade of Action for SDGs, but we quite agree with you that we should stress the financing for development and also to do so to support your efforts to mobilize the international community and all stakeholders and encourage them to meet their commitments on the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. We also agree with you on mobilizing robust partnerships that take account of the central role of the macroeconomic stability within states. My fourth observation, President, and I think that this is the last one, I'll conclude with this one. This is the celebration of the 25th anniversary of the Conference and Declaration of Beijing, and the 20th anniversary of Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security, as well as the 25th anniversary of the creation of UN Women. We should take these opportunities not to celebrate through speeches, but to make commitments, to renew our collective mobilization for the years to come, to strengthen the rights of women, of girls and of children. This is the best way to celebrate these anniversaries. Thank you very much once again, President.
I thank the distinguished representative of Morocco for his statement. And now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom. United Kingdom, you have the floor.
Many thanks, Mr. President. And I join you in paying our respects to the Omani delegation on the death of His Majesty Sultan Qaboos. It was a mark of the respect and admiration in which he was held that so many world leaders attended the commemorations over the weekend, including the Prince of Wales and the Prime Minister from the United Kingdom. Mr. President, we're very grateful to you, as ever, for this timely and comprehensive briefing, and also for giving us the document which looks ahead to the work of the General Assembly. It's advance notice like this that allows us to do the best that we can to meet your aspirations for the year ahead. I wanted to start by just echoing two of the things that you've said. The first on the SDG Decade of Action. Like you, we will give this our highest priority over the year ahead. It's the final opportunity for the international community to really deliver on the SDGs. And in this respect, we look forward to hosting the Africa Investment Summit in London next week. You also touched on peace and security, Mr. President, and we would like to see the 2020 review of the UN peacebuilding architecture be a real cornerstone for our work this year. We want to see the UN delivering on the commitments made by the SG in his 2018 report and positioning the system and its partners so we can be more effective in preventing conflict before it escalates. Mr. Chairman, we also would like to thank you personally for your commitment to our work on antimicrobial resistance, and in particular to you for agreeing to convene a high-level interactive dialogue on the 24th of March. This should be a significant priority for all of humanity, and we're very grateful to you for putting your support behind it. We look forward to working with a group of friends, and particularly China, Mexico, and the Republic of South Africa and Ghana in delivering this with them. Mr. Chairman, I also wanted to echo your points on 1325 and the huge progress we've made since then. It's important that we celebrate what we have achieved together on this agenda, and it's also incredibly important that we resist any attempts to unpick that historic progress. Also, Mr. President, you talked about UN 75. It was 74 years ago last week that the General Assembly met for the first time in London. It met that week before we had a Secretary General, before we had a Security Council, and before we had this extraordinary headquarters building. We were 51 member states. We're now 193 member states. We have a huge amount to celebrate. But I would join our colleague, the ambassador from Morocco, in saying that as we celebrate this 75th anniversary, we should look to the future and not to the past. And in particular, I hope that we will focus on your and the Secretary General's priority for this period, which is we consider the next 25 years and what we can achieve during that period and what our ambition should be during that period. So, Mr. President, we're very grateful to you. We look forward to your leadership, and we look forward most of all to working with all of our colleagues in this room to make this a successful year. Many thanks.
I thank the representative of the United Kingdom for his statement. And now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Italy. Italy, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you for this briefing on your priorities for the current session of the General Assembly. And I also want to say that it's good to see that the DSG is here with us this afternoon, and also is an opportunity for me to thank her for her wisdom and her leadership, her vision. And I think her presence gives me the opportunity to say how much we see the 70th anniversary of this organization as fully linked, in fact, to the decade of action to deliver SDGs. And I certainly take what my friend, the ambassador from Morocco, was saying in terms of we need to think of the future. And I think we have the instrument to think of the future during our 75th anniversary, and this is really the decade of action. So instead of maybe thinking of the next 75 years, we should focus on the next 10, and I think that would be already a lot. I align myself completely with the statement made by the European Union, and I just want to make few points. One is on climate change, and I think raising the ambition in the fight against climate change is an absolute priority. Italy wishes and want to help and lead the way, having already reached the 2020 European Union targets on emission reduction, energy efficiency, and use of renewable energy. We are determined to achieve climate neutrality by 2050 at the latest. In this spirit, we look forward to working together with the United Kingdom in order to organize a successful COP26 and its preparatory events. And while embarking in this journey, we call for all parties to master the highest level of ambition. In a spirit of continuity with the UN Youth Climate Summit in New York, we will host a significant youth event in Milan during the pre-COP. And likewise, recognizing that Africa is said to be the worst affected by the devastating impacts of climate change, Italy will also organize a dedicated event with our African partners. The preservation of our ocean and biodiversity will be a crucial testing ground for our environmental action in 2020. The UN Ocean Conference in Lisbon, the Summit on Biodiversity, and the COP15 on the Convention on Biodiversity are crucial appointments for the future of our planet. And I'm honored to have the responsibility, together with Ambassador Carazo Zeledon of Costa Rica, to facilitate the negotiation process on the Biodiversity Summit. Mr. President, the United Nations should also lead by example the efforts of the international community to preserve the environment. And in this respect, I would like to reiterate my country's commitment, also as a co-chair together with Bangladesh, of the Group of Friends for Leading on Environmental Management in the Field, to continue supporting the UN in reducing the environmental footprint of its operation worldwide. Mr. President, we appreciate the emphasis you have placed on the protection of human rights and commend the particular attention you intend to devote to inclusion, education, and the empowerment of women and youth. The 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration on Platform for Action and the 20th anniversary of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325 call upon us to work relentlessly to achieve gender parity for the sake of peace and prosperity for all. In this crucial year, we have to be ready to push back the pushback, to use the words of the Secretary General, and refuse to backtrack on women's rights, including sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights. We will not accept any attempt to hinder or reverse this progress. We will work to make sure that we further advance on this path and that all women, especially those in most vulnerable situations, have full access to their rights. On reform and revitalization, Mr. President, I would like to reiterate Italy's support for the important reforms that the General Assembly has launched, aimed at making the UN more capable to face today's challenges. In this context, I wish to reaffirm that we believe in the central role of the General Assembly through beating heart of our organization. Within the overall reform of the United Nations, the reform of the Security Council holds a special place. To enhance the Council authority and its effectiveness, we must aim for a new, expanded Council that is more transparent, more representative, and more democratic, and most of all, more effective. This will make it more accountable to the wider membership and to the General Assembly. It will bolster its legitimacy in the eyes of the public, and it will improve its ability to deliver effective solutions for the maintenance of international peace and security. And I thank you.
I thank the representative of Italy for her statement. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Bangladesh. Bangladesh, you have the floor.
Mr. President, I thank you for organizing today's meeting and briefing us on your priorities for the resumed part of the 74th UNGA session. Mr. President, this resumed session is of particular importance for a number of reasons. We are on the verge of observing the 75th anniversary of the UN, and that happily coincides with a few other important landmarks, namely the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Conference and the 20th anniversary of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda. This session will also kick off the Decade of Action, an important catalyst for achieving the 2030 Agenda. No wonder this resumed session is heavy on mandate, with a number of high-level events, reviews, and processes already lined up. Having all these in the next several months may be a challenge, but these are also wonderful opportunities to consolidate our collective resolve and goodwill to address the global challenges that the UN is facing. In this context, we appreciate the roadmap for the implementation of your vision. This is a useful document which not only gives us a handy overview of the events in the pipeline, but also serves to prepare us well, not to mention that it reminds us how full the agenda is and of the intensity of the tasks before us. Nonetheless, we need to space out the events and processes in such a manner that would not challenge the capacity of smaller delegations. Mr. President, your focus on the 4 SDGs, poverty eradication, zero hunger, quality education, and climate action, are of crucial importance. They align with our national priorities, as it is for many other developing countries. We have made remarkable progress in these areas and are doing our best for their achievement. We would be happy to share our best practices and contribute in any way to the deliberations of these issues at the UN. As a chief deliberative and policy-making organ of the UN and the world's most representative intergovernmental organ, it is of utmost importance that the GA lives up to the expectation of member states. We wish to see a more empowered General Assembly taking the lead and acting in synergy and complementarity with other main organs of the UN, avoiding duplication and overlap. Work of the ad hoc working group on the revitalization of the GA would be a critical enabler in this regard, as also the alignment of the GA agenda with the 2030 agenda. We wish to see some concrete progress this year in these fronts. We expect the same to happen with regard to other important and mandated reviews and processes. We look up to your leadership, Mr. President, and assure you of my delegation's full support in dispensation of your responsibilities. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Bangladesh for her statement. And now give the floor to the distinguished representative of China. China, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Like other delegations, the Chinese delegation wishes to thank you for your detailed briefing of the priorities for 2020. This is very useful for us to strengthen cooperation and to accomplish all the goals outlined. Here, I wish to express appreciation in that under your stewardship, there have been great achievements since the start of this session. You have effectively organized and held the UN High-Level Week, unprecedented in UN history in terms of activities. You have been in close coordination with the chairmanship of the main committees and overcome all the difficulties so as to ensure that the first committee and the sixth committee adopted their work plan, and to ensure that other committees have completed their work with regard to the fifth committee. We express our appreciation in this connection. China agreed In principle, what you have just mentioned in your briefing, here I have a few points to make. First, during the 74th session of the GA, we should emphasize that we must uphold the purpose and the principles of the UN Charter, multilateralism. The new year, we have seen that during the past 13 days in this new year, we've seen the complex situation of the world situation. The turbulence led the world at one point to the brink of war. Under such circumstances, we should further emphasize the importance of the principles and charters of the UN Charter and the importance of upholding the international system of the UN at its core and the international order based on the law. We should be against the use or threat of use of force. This is especially important under such circumstances. The UN General Assembly represents all the membership of the United Nations. Therefore, it is also a reflection of the hope of every country, every member state, and the people all over the world. Therefore, we hope that the UN should hold steady the general direction of its work. Second, I wanted to emphasize that development should be given high priority in the work. Attention should be given to the difficulties of the developing countries. At present, we see that the world development is not uneven, and underdevelopment is a serious problem. The implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development gives no reason for optimism despite of achievements. We hope that priorities should be given to elimination of poverty, elimination of hunger, quality education, and infrastructure. We are pleased to see that these have been given the attention they deserve. We will support your work. Here, I'd like to tell the meeting that the Sustainable Development meeting will be held in China in May. I hope that this meeting will be of great importance in terms of the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. We hope that everyone will work to their best so as to create favorable conditions for the developing countries, to provide financing, technology, and capacity building support to developing countries. We should also join hands in forging a free and open trading system and to promote an open world economy so that we can achieve our goals of development. Thirdly, at this session, we should urge the parties concerned to strengthen cooperation and to face in a joint manner all the challenges we are facing today. Here, as was mentioned by my colleagues, there is the issue of climate change. It is truly a global challenge. Therefore, every member, every country should make its contribution. We don't believe that any country can remain immune from this world challenge. Also, terrorism is a common challenge facing our world. Whether from Asia to Europe, from America to Africa, we can see the spread of terrorism. Recently, this phenomenon is on the rise in Africa. Therefore, we must join hands in fighting terrorism. In this connection, we must be against politicizing the issue of terrorism, and reject double standards. Fourthly, each member state should, under the leadership of the President of the General Assembly, should strengthen cooperation and unity so that we may handle in a satisfactory manner all the sensitive issues. We are facing many acute and complex issues. Here, we must make sure that we make progress, but on the other hand, we must also make sure that we can enhance our mutual understanding. The reform of the Security Council is highly sensitive and it's a very important issue. Here, we must, through thorough coordination, democratic coordination in order to arrive at a package deal that takes into account all the interests concerned. China will be actively participating in the intergovernmental negotiation and to support the co-chairs, i.e. UAE and Argentina, for their work. Once again, I wish to thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of China for his statement. And now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Argentina for his statement. Argentina, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, President. I would like to thank you very much for distributing this calendar to us, which outlines the events that we have planned in 2020. We certainly knew that this was going to entail quite a bit of work. We agree with your priorities that you've outlined, and you can certainly count on our full support. In the commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, this cannot be delinked from the international context. We must bolster confidence and dialogue and mutual understanding. Argentina is convinced that we must focus on what unites us and what makes the UN this organization that ultimately doesn't take us to heaven but saves us from hell. I would like to thank the co-facilitators of Sweden and Qatar, who will be facilitating deliberations on this declaration for the 75th anniversary. As other speakers have mentioned, the reform of the Security Council is another matter that we hold dear. Argentina, since it became a member of this organization 75 years ago, highlighted the importance of making the Security Council a truly democratic body without any privileges. We therefore hope to continue with the intergovernmental negotiations on this matter to reach a result obtained by consensus. We therefore welcome the appointment of the two co-facilitators, the representatives of Poland and the UAE for that process. This year, we will also be marking the 10th anniversary of the open-ended working group on aging. For the first time, negotiations will begin on recommendations for this group, for concrete measures to start being taken in this context. We do hope to see the support of all delegations in this endeavor too. We also, speaking of anniversaries, have the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform of Action. This is critical, President, to reaffirm the commitments made by the organization when it comes to upholding gender equality and to achieving the empowerment of women and girls without leaving behind anyone, and ensuring that we build a fairer world. In terms of the challenges for the forthcoming months, the outcome document for the second Oceans Conference is another important matter. And this year we will also have the fourth session of the conference for negotiations on a new treaty on biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction, the BBNJ process. Argentina hopes that in this fourth session an ambitious treaty will be concluded, which will meet the aspirations of our peoples when it comes to protecting the oceans. Another priority for my delegation has been education, President. That is why we co-chaired the group of friends for education, together with Kenya, Japan, and some other countries. We aimed in this context to uphold the importance of this matter, to ensure that measures are taken to ensure that everybody can achieve inclusive education of high quality. We would therefore like to congratulate Nigeria, who promoted the GA commemorating the 24th of January as the Day for Education. We also focused on the fight against modern slavery and to achieve decent work for all. Among the various forms of exploitation, we must strive to stamp out child labor. 2021 will be the international year to eliminate child labor. And this is why, President, this year we must start to think about how we can coordinate the necessary actions to bring an end to this scourge. We've heard mention of the importance of cooperation here. I wish to recall that South-South cooperation was a critical issue during the last session. In Buenos Aires, the second high-level UN conference on South-South cooperation was held in March last year. We must continue to make progress on this matter and on triangular cooperation, and as you yourself mentioned, President, in your calendar, the high-level event on the 12th of February on South-South cooperation and food security will be a critical issue. These are all critical issues indeed for my country. When it comes to peacekeeping, Argentina commends and welcomes all areas of debate for member states to bring about initiatives and necessary alternatives, if necessary, for the implementation of reforms to the peace and security pillar and the management of the organization promoted by the Secretary General, as well as the implementation of the commitments undertaken within the context of the peacekeeping agenda to which Argentina has signed up. Building in the context of sustaining peace, we do hope that the negotiations in the forthcoming months will ultimately, on this issue, will bear fruit and will lead to the necessary amendments being made to modernize the work of the organization and to tailor the work of the organization to the new challenges. We must also mention terrorism as a critical issue. We highlight the designation of the representatives of Egypt and Spain to lead the negotiations on this area of work. We do hope that it will be possible to achieve a balance between the various pillars, respecting international law, international humanitarian law, international human rights, and the rights of refugees, as well as the purposes and principles of the United Nations Charter in this context. And lastly, President, we do hope that during 2020, the Secretariat with member states will continue to work to achieve consensus that will allow us to deal with the financial crisis that the organization is facing so that it can have a solid economic base to ensure that it can run smoothly. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Argentina for his statement, and I give the floor to the representative of United States for her statement.
Thank you, Mr. President. I join others in expressing condolences to the people of Oman as well as Niger and to the people of Australia. We very much appreciate your overview at the start of 2020 and your commitment to ensure the effective functioning of the General Assembly and the multitude of important issues that are before us. As we move forward on the issues before us, we very much appreciate including bringing the human rights into all elements of our work. As others have said, as we enter into the 75th anniversary, the full inclusion of civil society is also very welcome, and we need to throw the doors wide open to ensure the organization's relevance and integrity. The peoples of the world, as has been said over the course of the year, and the goal of the reforms that we have been talking about need to see that there are tangible solutions being advanced to address the challenges we face. And we very much appreciate your leadership on the variety of issues, including poverty, education, hunger, et cetera. We also firmly believe, though, that member states, we as member states, must take a look at the variety of issues and what we are requesting of the UN and rationalize and streamline mandates. This is also an important element of UN reform, and that we ensure that we are driving effective solutions to the issues that we are considering. Mr. President, one issue that I would like to raise today that threatens to create a rift between the membership is a proposal to expand the advisory committee of administrative and budgetary questions, as everyone knows, the ACABQ, without adequate consultations and consensus. An issue of such importance should not be foisted on a significant number of member states without trying to find a solution. Where this issue has always been discussed, and that is the Fifth Committee. We very much appreciate your engagement and your engagement thus far on this issue, and we call on our colleagues from the G77 and China to reconsider their approach and ensure all efforts are taken without resorting to forceful actions that does not enjoy consensus by the whole membership. This does not help our collective partnership or serve the organization well. And to conclude, Mr. President, we do stand ready to help in any of the issues and engage constructively as we go forward in 2020. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United States of America for her statement. And now I'll give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cameroon. Cameroon, have the floor.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. The distinguished ambassador of Togo spoke on behalf of the African group on the issues at hand. I would like to support what he said on behalf of the African states. Secondly, Mr. President, you are addressing the second half of your program, which is highly important, as was the case with the first half, where you demonstrated your capabilities in leadership and in coordination. When we look back on the last 75 years, we can say that the indicator of the success of this organization was its ability to prevent future generations from suffering a repeat of the scourge of the 2 world wars, of which the world suffered so much. We now are looking towards the future, while celebrating the 75th anniversary of the organization. As the distinguished representative of Morocco said, it is the future that counts. Mr. President, the times we are living through at the moment show that there are dangerous signs afoot, and that the land itself and our planet and the forces that the planet holds are coming through in the volcanoes that erupt and in the tornadoes that rage and that are a source of suffering for all. Therefore, the most urgent question in this 75th year or on this 75th anniversary is as follows. How can we continue to live together? How can we continue to live together when centrifugal forces are trying to triumph over the centripetal forces in our world? When forces of disunity try to defeat the source of solidarity, truly, we are living through a time when peace, security, and the welfare of each and every person are at stake. And those are the things that are decisive for our future. Those features are under attack. That is then the challenge that we all have to face, and in particular, our two colleagues from Sweden and also from Qatar. They have the mandate of trying to facilitate the declaration for the 75th anniversary. It is our view that this declaration should draw on what we have already decided collectively. You know very well that when it came to Rio+20, we adopted the future that we want. And in the future that we want, we placed the human being and the planet and solidarity, as well as the eradication of poverty, and progress and shared prosperity at the center of our considerations. We also included partnership, ownership, science, finance, technology. These were all at the center. We all agreed on that vision. Following Rio+20, we've come together and we adopted 17 strategic goals that should allow us, in all of the areas of the organization's activity, to make progress by 2030, to achieve the future that we want. Therefore, in the declaration for the 75th anniversary, it should build upon this consensus and around these structuring concepts. And it should do that in order to find a new way to strengthen our solidarity and to strengthen the idea of living together in diversity but in unity as well. We should also have another similar declaration where we exercise the most common words that we are assailed by, whether we talk of terrorism, whether we talk of different arenas of tension in different regions around the world. When we have drawn up a joint declaration to be adopted on the 75th anniversary, if we can do that, we will have done useful work, and we will also have shown that we, this current generation, can build on the United Nations and can emulate the founding fathers of this organization, who allowed us to live through 75 years of peace and security, even if, as I've said, there are challenges that at the moment are rather frightening. Mr. President, the time has come, as we say in Africa, to join forces as brave men and women. The time has come to show that we too, yesterday as today, today as tomorrow, that we are capable of leaving the world better than we found it, so that those to come after us shall say, yes, they deserved their time here and they took on their responsibilities and they have passed the torch to us. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Cameroon for his statement. And I give the floor to the representative of Mexico. Distinguished representative of Mexico, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, President. President, Mexico would also like to express its condolences, as you yourself did at the beginning of the session, to Oman and Australia, and we would also like to express our condolences to our brothers in Canada. President, during the months that remain within this session of the General Assembly, we will be preparing for the 75th anniversary of this organization. And within this context, President, we have a very happy alignment of the planets in that we have an opportunity, a unique opportunity, to consolidate the reform of the UN development system and also to build a follow-up that we will be giving to the 2030 agenda. And above all, President, in the context of the Decade for Action, we have stated that we have 10 years to attain the Sustainable Development Goals. And that is why the fact that we have a mandate, I imagine that in your calendar you didn't include this process of strengthening and alignment, both in the terms of the ECOSOC and the HLPF. You didn't include those perhaps because they are not a one-off event, but nevertheless they are a priority event for all members of the organization. And in that context, we'll be defining the new modalities for the high-level political forum, and we will be undertaking the review process for ECOSOC. These are two events and processes that have to go hand in hand to ensure absolute coherence and consistency so that we can achieve the best possible result. Also, when it comes to changing the way in which we've been working in the HLPF and in ECOSOC, we must also ensure it has an impact when it comes to changing the way in which this organization works and really having an impact on the QCPR, which we'll be starting to negotiate from next autumn. So there's an extraordinary opportunity here, therefore, for us to have the best possible development system in the United Nations. When it comes to another matter, President, given our long-standing position, we wish to say that we'll be marking the review conference on the MPT conference, which is marking 50 years, and 50 years at a historic time of great risk for humanity. Mexico is particularly concerned, indeed, that we must give priority to eliminating nuclear weapons from the world. This is particularly important at a time when the nuclear threat is perhaps more imminent than ever. We therefore think this is a very important issue. On the reform of the Security Council, Mexico would like the intergovernmental negotiations on this matter to continue on the same terms that had been indicated by the distinguished representatives of Italy and Argentina. We must have a reform that has the broadest possible support. Next, when it comes to rapid technological change, we would like to thank you for your initiative to hold the session on the 11th of May on this matter, as we see in the calendar, and this prior to the marking of the Science and Technology and Innovation Forum, the STI Forum, which will begin on the 12th of May. And we think that's an excellent idea to hold this event the day before, given that it's a very important week then that will be devoted to the important issues of technological change and science and innovation. So thank you for that. Finally, President, on the issue of Beijing Plus 25, as we all know, Mexico and France are organizing the Fora for Equality prior to the formal session, which is perfectly reflected in your calendar, and we wish simply to say that Mexico and France are working together with civil society so that we can make sure we have the best possible results in the context of the Beijing Plus 25 Forum. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Mexico for his statement, and I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Pakistan for her statement. Pakistan.
Thank you,
For his
Mr.
statement.
President. Mr. President, we thank you for the comprehensive briefing. We fully support your progressive, development-oriented agenda to eradicate poverty, hunger, and enhance opportunities for quality education for all. This is in consonance with our own national priorities. Mr. President, as we approach the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, the world order established on the basis of the fundamental principles of the Charter is rapidly eroding today. We are witnessing a growing revival of great power rivalry, a renewed arms race, and a lack of trust in the institutions of global governance, including the United Nations. You have yourself spoken of the imperative to stem this growing tide of cynicism and apathy. Mr. President, if this trend is to be reversed, all member states of the United Nations must live up to the principles and purposes of the UN Charter, based on sovereign equality of states, peaceful settlement of disputes, and respect for fundamental rights, including the right of self-determination. These fundamental rights continue to be denied across the world in flagrant violation of UN resolutions. Entire populations remain encaged in open-air prisons. Resort to unilateral force and external intervention is becoming ever more frequent. Foreign occupation is often tolerated. Mr. President, despite the war on terror, terrorism has spread to all parts of the world. We must attack terrorism comprehensively, addressing the symptoms, but also the underlying causes. We look forward to the review of the counterterrorism strategy. Besides peace and security, our first priority is development. We are not on track to achieve the SDGs. We have declared a decade of action, but we are not clear what such action should be. On the contrary, the world trade and financial system is under threat of collapse from the weight of trade and technology wars. Critically, we need to find ways to mobilize the financing required to achieve the SDGs. Mr. President, climate change poses another existential threat to our planet and to global development and peace. We must develop the mechanisms to ensure implementation of the commitments and goals of the Paris Agreements in accordance with the principle of common and differentiated responsibility. To realize these objectives, we must make progress at this session to revive the central role of the General Assembly, reform the Security Council to make it more representative, equitable, and responsible to the entire UN membership, and to activate the full potential of the Economic and Social Council as the central coordinating mechanism of the global economic system. Mr. President, Pakistan will participate and cooperate actively with you to advance these objectives at this session and in preparation for the 75th anniversary session of the United Nations. Thank you, sir.
I thank the distinguished representative of Pakistan for his statement. And now give the floor once again to the United Kingdom.
Many thanks, Mr. President. And I take the floor again briefly because I wanted to join my United States colleague and ambassador in stating our strong concern over the handling of ACABQ enlargement discussions. I know this is something that you have committed some time to through your good offices, Mr. President, and it is also an issue that will be discussed by the General Assembly and plenary tomorrow. Mr. President, the UK is committed to constructive discussions on ACABQ enlargement and reform, including the issue of geographical representation. But we have deep concerns over the way in which agreed procedures have been circumnavigated in dealing with this matter, and we have set these out previously, both in person to many here, but also in writing. As past practice and precedent indicate, these issues should be dealt with in the Fifth Committee. That they have been instead allowed to advance directly to the plenary without substantive or inclusive consultations clearly undermines the long-established principle that the Fifth Committee works on the basis of consensus. I'm afraid we condemn this approach and anticipate that it will have unprecedented, far-reaching and damaging consequences for agreement on budgetary matters and for the future functioning of both the Fifth Committee and the General Assembly. Mr. President, we hope that whatever the outcome in the plenary tomorrow, that colleagues will come together and return to consensus as a decision-making process and bring this issue back to the Fifth Committee in March. It's incredibly important, Mr. President, that we've considered today what this General Assembly does, but it's also important that we remember how we do things, and we think it's important in particular that we do this properly. Thank you very much.
We have heard the last request for the floor from the delegations. I would simply like to conclude this discussion. There are no further comments? No. Okay. By acknowledging the relevance, in fact, in some cases, even the urgency of the issues raised by the delegations. And there is no need for me to go blow by blow over what has been stated, but let me just mention 3 or 4 critical elements. One is the question of working harder at consensus, especially on issues around which we disagree, and in the same vein, privileging dialogue in a respectful manner so that we're able to deepen respect for the organization and for the work it does. 2 is the urgency concerning support to processes that are ongoing, especially in line with the agenda of the 74th session, but also as a principle, deepening the mandates inherited. And this is what we have done from the beginning of the presidency, and this is what we will continue to do to the last day, because these processes are important, and they are mandated events. And in the same vein, use all the opportunities for informal processes to deepen the work we do in those other processes that are mandated, including, of course, reaching out to civil society and others in getting knowledge and ideas, and also in bringing in fresh ideas to the organization. It's also important to especially privilege urgent issues relating to climate, and given what has all been stated by all of us, but also in relation to cooperation against terror and deepening of rights. The opportunity provided by further reflections relating to Beijing and other processes, I think, is really key. Next is the issue of importance relating to all the reforms. I think the main approach is to continue to urge thoughtful engagement in all the processes. And you have our commitment as an office to do what is right and proper. And this is the only way we can properly celebrate or commemorate the real achievement of this organization. As everyone has mentioned, there has to be meaning to the commemoration of the 75th anniversary. That meaning must deal with the future, because even with the difficulty of the current situation, we have to communicate better, because this is the truth. The organization has been very good for all of us. And let me conclude by saying that we'll continue to reach out to all delegations and to the membership in groups and also individually throughout the session. And we wish you a happy and productive 2020. Thank you very much. I thank members for their participation at the briefing. And the informal meeting of the plenary is now concluded. The meeting is adjourned. I take my note because
This is yours.
if I leave, I'm the only